My name is Caroline Hull, and I am the National Director of Aid to the Church in Need UK. And today I'd like to speak to you for just a couple of minutes about the situation for Christians in Lebanon. Lebanon is a wonderful country. I was just there a few months ago and met some fantastic people. They're really struggling at the moment. I don't know if you know, but Lebanon is the only country in the Middle East that had, up until about the 1950s, a Christian majority, and it still has a higher proportion of Christians than any other country in the region. But that's changing, and that's changing rapidly. You'll remember a couple of years ago there was a huge explosion in the port at Beirut, that impacted the Christian community particularly badly in Beirut because a big Christian neighborhood, Christian quarter, backed onto the area where the explosion took place. So those people suffered incredibly as a result, direct result of the explosion. But people in Lebanon are dealing with other problems as well. There are about 1.5 million registered refugees, mostly from Syria, in Lebanon today. And that is really every, 3 or 4 people you might meet in the street is likely to be a refugee. And that doesn't count all of the people who haven't registered, many of whom are Christians and who are afraid to register with the government or with the UN. And that's putting an incredible strain on an already suffering, toppling infrastructure. Couple that with a lot of political stagnation and corruption, the total collapse of the economy in Lebanon, which was largely based on services and financial services. Lebanon now produces very little. They import most of their goods and most of their food. So with the topple and collapse of the value of the currency and the economy, people don't have the resources to hand just to feed themselves, let alone anything else. So there are big problems. There's no free medical care. There's no free education. So the many projects that ACN has been working with the Lebanese church to support, to use to support the Christian refugees who've come across into Lebanon. Now we're finding that the native Christian community in Lebanon, the people who were supporting these projects themselves, are now actually having to use them. So it's a dire, dire situation. When I was there, I visited schools where there's no free education, so parents can no longer afford to pay the fees. The government, their grant maintained, but the government, in some cases for 3 or 4 years, hasn't made any payments. Teachers are leaving because they're quite highly qualified, and so they find it easy to find jobs in other countries. And those who are staying are doing things like sleeping in school because their monthly salary is so low that the commute to get to school eats so much of it up that they just can't afford to do it. I visited hospitals with skeletal staff, closed wards, empty beds. It's really, really difficult. I've also visited young people at a university chaplaincy who told us in no uncertain terms that they loved their country. Their faith was very deep. Their families had lived here and been Christians in Lebanon for generations, but they had to go because they had no future, no jobs, no education, no medical help, nothing. And they know that it's hard, it's a bad time for them to go. They'll put down roots, they'll have families, they'll have mortgages, and they won't be able to come back. And just tears running down their faces while they're telling us these stories. So the people in Lebanon, the Christian communities in particular, have been there for a very, very long time. These are some of the most ancient Christian communities in the world. They really need our help, both the refugees and the native Christian communities. So please remember them in your prayers, and please also, if you can provide financial support, that's help that they need too. ACN is supporting all kinds of projects in schools, in parishes. We're supporting catechists, we're supporting seminarians, also hospitals. So we are doing everything we can to work with you to help make the situation better for some of these ancient Christian communities, as well as for some of the traumatized people who have crossed over into Lebanon looking for help. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your prayers for the suffering church in Lebanon.